Hey, good morning. Yes, it is. It is Saturday morning, April. Haha, got you again. May 4th. And today, on the weekends, we tend to go off the rail a little bit, right? Well, today's topic is going to be assumptions, assuming, and making snap judgments, and why all of those have their pros and cons. So, this should be interesting. Stay tuned. So, welcome back. My name is Eric, if you didn't already know it, and this is the weekend. And the weekend, we kind of go off the rail a little bit. Monday through Friday is the weekday, and we talk about business and a lot of things to do with repairing things. We also throw out repair videos for you guys that are wanting to learn or see a different plan of attack, that might work for you. But today we're talking about assumptions, and snap judgments. And we're all doing that on a regular basis, aren't we? And I just thought today's topic is leaning towards when sometimes it's not always the case. And, you assume when you've been around long enough, we'll get back to that. Time gets experience, and the good experiences and bad experiences create wisdom. And sometimes you overlook things. Even it happens to the best of us. We were talking about don't be a parts replacer. And the biggest problem that I see there is assumption. Assume. It's when you assume something is okay and you let it go, even though you got a proper plan of attack and it's worked well for you. Even the best mechanics will overlook compression, and they will spend a lot of time working on something, and then finally, with scratching their heads and everything else, say, well, I can't do it. I just can't get it to run. And then have somebody throw a compression test on it, which should have been number one, and find out you're in the mid-70s. There's your reason. So, I've seen Claude do that, and he's going on 73 this year. He's got a lot of experience. So if you're sitting there saying, well, I screwed up, I didn't check compression, I should have checked compression, stop. Stop. Because it's going to happen to you again. Because it happens to the best of us. We approach things, we know how we're supposed to do it. We know the correct way. But then our brain just says, it can't be that. So it's got to be this based on the time, experience, and wisdom. The wisdom says this is how it worked the last time. Then maybe that's how it'll work this time. Or it's worked consecutively on the last 10 things. It's going to work on the 11th. And that is not always the case. That's why in life you have to set up a plan of attack no matter what you're doing or how you're going to approach things. If you're trying to save money and build your savings account, you're going to have to do some kind of financial planning, aren't you? Of where you sit down and you look through all the bills and you look to see where we can make cuts and look to where we can gain the money that we want to put into the savings from somewhere else. And a lot of times what I find with a lot of folks is, you're paying $5-6 for a cup of coffee. If you put that $5-6 in the savings account and just carry the thermos with coffee in it, a whole thermos isn't going to cost you $2. Just if you don't have to give up the coffee. It's just you have to have a different way of looking at it. And the way I look at it is I like mine perked, okay? So I'll make 4 to 8 cups at a time. And I carry a thermos with me to work. I have my gold mug, and then I fill a thermos for the rest of the day. And a can of coffee for Perk Maxwell House I catch it on sale for under $9. Will last me a little over 2 weeks, okay? So now you're looking at 2 weeks for $8 or $9. You're supplying the water, which is free. You're supplying the electricity for your coffee maker, which is free. And the coffee maker I've had for almost 2 years now. So, I mean, you might as well say that's free too, right? And you're paying for your own half and half or cream or milk, whatever you use, okay? But still, let's do the math. If you're working 5 days a week, so you grab a coffee every morning on the way into work, and we'll say that it's at $5 a cup, there's $25 a week that you're spending just on your way into work to have coffee. Now, if we look at your Perk coffee over you're buying that cup of coffee at Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts or what have you, at the end of the 2 weeks, which is, I'll say 2 weeks for a can of coffee at $8. At the end of the 2 weeks now, by taking and filling your gold mug, and that's usually more than what you get at a cup of coffee, right? And if you're a coffee drinker and you like coffee later in the day, it's going to be more expensive because then you're going to be buying it through a vending machine at work or what have you. But let's not get confused with all that. Let's still stick with the $25 a week. All right, so for over 2 weeks, now you spent $50 stopping at your local coffee shop. So $50 versus $8. So if you take the $8 off the 50, what are you left with? 42, right? So you take the $42 and you put that in your savings account every 2 weeks, which equals $84 a month. And not only are you getting a full coffee mug, a gold mug full, but you're also carrying a thermos so that you're not buying more coffee throughout the day. You see where I'm going with this? Most of us, if we sat down and actually thought about what we spend our money on a daily basis, whether it's, buying lunch at the restaurant versus carrying bag lunches. Every place that I worked, when I did eat lunch, I always took my thermos full of coffee, and I had one bologna sandwich, and usually something sweet, candy bar or what have you. But most of my life, I don't eat anything until dinner time. But if you're eating breakfast and lunch, breakfast on the way into work, and lunch on your lunch break, if you had a quick bowl of cereal before you went to work in the morning, with some juice, which is healthy for you, or a bowl of cream of wheat, oatmeal, and then at lunch, you bagged your lunch with ham and cheese sandwich, a bag of potato chips, stuff that sounds good to you. The money that you are going to save over that next 2 week period now is going to be well into the hundreds of dollars. So not only have you got in the bank of $84 to put towards the savings, now you've approached something else that you can pull money from, right? And it goes on and on and on. And you can look at not only that, but other places that you're not, because a lot of times we don't realize that we're just throwing money into the wind, per se. What do they say? If you got it, you don't worry about it, but when you don't got it, you're counting your bottles and cans. Been there, done that. But that's what I mean by a plan of attack. It's you need to have something in place to get you started in the right direction. And if you didn't sit down and look at your financial, where you're spending stuff, it's going to make that of trying to find some money for the savings very daunting because you don't have the right numbers to work with. You might be able to ride with a friend, alternate week to week that you both work at the same workplace. Save money on gas. Both of you will, because one week you're going to drive and the next week they're going to drive. Years ago, we called it carpooling. When the gas prices got higher, carpooling was pretty commonplace. You don't see that so much anymore. Only on Friday nights, a party night, right? But there's so many places that you could save money without killing the budget. Without going without. It doesn't have to be that all or nothing. But we're also making assumptions on people, right? We're making snap judgments. And what do I mean by that? I mean, if you look at somebody that doesn't spell very well, and you're sitting there trying to figure out what they're saying, in a sentence, the snap judgment goes to, this one is very uneducated, right? But I've seen that be totally 110% not true. My grandfather, and yes, I'm kind of partial to my family, but my grandfather, I was raised by my grandparents because my mother and father passed away at, in their early 30s. And the one thing with him was he graduated the 6th grade and then he went to work on the family farm. And that was commonplace back then. But having a good grasp of spelling, reading, writing, all that stuff, kind of slid you by. You were just taught the basics. And a lot of times, if you weren't up to speed, they just pushed you through because they needed you on the farm by a certain age, right? And I see that a lot with the Amish. They have their own schoolrooms and stuff. If you're doing a writing correspondence with them, their writing is hard to follow. They don't know the word of capitalization. And they also don't have spell check and Grammarly. But what I'm getting at, my grandfather, his reading and writing were down low, okay? And he was self-taught. He had a problem trying to write, spell things out, and sometimes read certain things. But one of the jobs that he had got once he left the family farm was he went to work for a paper mill. And he was taken on underneath a wing of somebody that was a journeyman repairman. And they kept the mill in top-notch shape. Anything that needed welding or replacing or this or that, that's what that crew was, in that part of the mill. And he self-taught himself how to read schematics for electrical issues, for structural issues, for degrees in the angles of the pipe. And it wasn't because he was uneducated. It was because he didn't have the reading and writing part weren't stressed in his younger years, because in his younger years, it was going to work on the family farm, right? And I can remember him later in life because he still had issues with, he got so he could read pretty good, but he still had problems writing and, spelling things correctly. And I watched him. He would do 2 crosswords a day. And by doing 2 crosswords a day, he increased his reading and writing and vocabulary. Astounding. Now, if we had made a snap judgment or assumption that based on his writing skill, this person is uneducated, we would be wrong, right? But we do that every day. We're making snap judgment calls of people, and what we think they are or aren't based on what we see. And what I can tell you is a lot of times we don't see the whole picture. We're just focused on the reading and writing instead of the individual as a whole. He was well-rounded. Everybody loved him. They called him the judge because if anybody had any issues, they'd come to him to get his take, and he would listen to both sides and let them plead their case as the judge would. And he would use common sense. So there's a good case of where you can make an assumption quick on someone. Coworkers. Because someone is quiet, not necessarily doesn't make a person shy or standoffish. Some people are that way because they just don't want to be part of drama. If you wanted to hold on to a decent conversation with them, they'd be happy to do that. But if you're talking, office talk and gossip about different ones, they don't want nothing to do with it. So instead of getting involved with crap, they tend to stay to themselves. They get their work done, and then they go. And when they get home, they're happy to be home, but they're not shy and insecure. They just don't like drama. But yes, I've seen the other side of it where someone is very shy and they come off almost rude because they have to try to be the center, and they're not trying to be the center. They're just trying to get a point across. And they don't have the confidence just to speak well. But if you get them in their own environment where they're comfortable, you could hold on to beautiful conversations with them all day long and have become your best friends. Once they don't have you on a pedestal, this is the way I look at it. There's a lot of times with that type of person, they have you on the pedestal, so they feel like, they're down here and you're up here, so they're so nervous about saying something stupid. They do say something stupid. But if you can bring it down to kind of the same playing field where they don't feel like they have to be somebody that they're not, they're very loyal, very compassionate, and somebody you'd want to have for a best friend. But you may never know that if you're making snap judgment calls on people instead of... My tendency is, we did this a while back, who are you in the group at the party? And my tendency is, it's hard not to try to make snap judgments, but I force myself to, wait a minute, what are you doing? You don't know nothing about this individual. And a lot of times I watch how things are going, and I enjoy conversation. I enjoy people, so I'll go up and talk with anybody. If I see them kind of sitting alone by themselves, I'll go over and just see what's going on with them. Ask them how they're doing and what they're thinking about. So there's two cases that we make snap judgments based on what we see and hear that can lead you down the wrong path, right? So I'm going to start winding this down. The biggest thing I want with today's video is that we all do it. We all make assumptions on people, assumptions on procedures that we're working on, snap judgment calls, and a lot of times it's not true. It's not seeing the big picture. We're just seeing the small aspect of something. It's just like the engine, the compression. If you don't have compression, that's going to give you a telltale sign of what you're going to do next, right? If you don't know the whole individual, how can you make a judgment call on them? And the old saying goes, before you judge me, walk a mile in my shoes. You have no clue what's going on in the other person's life. Not a clue. You may think you do, because now you're making snap judgments again. But until you really know the person, you have no clue. And I've seen husband and wives, they've been together for years and have no clue of what the other one wants and needs out of life. So on that note, you guys have a great Saturday. We'll catch you here bright early tomorrow morning. Not sure what we're going to talk about, but you know how I am. I'm full of content. All right, guys.